The ideas that gave birth to our nation are the ideas that our nation is resistant to right now, and we should talk about that all the time.
In a world where narratives are shaped by corporations and gatekeepers, independent voices matter more than ever. Badlands Media brings together citizen journalists, researchers, and independent thinkers.
The truth is triggering.
Question the narrative. Explore the facts.
It's authenticity, courage, resilience.
Search for the truth others won't.
It's not about being first or being right.
The information war is changing.
It's about being authentic.
Embrace the friction.
Embrace the friction.
Shut the f*** up.
Authentically antagonizing. Join the movement.
I'm going to say how I feel.
Follow Badlands Media.
This is about the future.
The Badlands. What are the Badlands? Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Badlands Daily this morning, but I'll just go ahead and play it again because it's very short. Yeah, I did not know that. Like, I went to the Virgin Islands for my best friend's wedding, and I did not know that Epstein Island was like right there. And like we went by it on the ferry to get to the island we were at. Wild stuff. Yeah. So what I didn't know is I didn't know that it was like so close to civilization. So I'll turn the sound off. Okay, so there's the temple. Sorry for the camera work, but so it's just like surrounded by islands. There's houses all over and resorts all over these islands, hotels. And then over here, St. Thomas is even more so. Look at this. Like, look at all these houses, just like all these buildings, all this civilization, and it looks right at the island. Like you're looking right at it. And the people who live there said that, yeah, they said like back in the day, you always knew when Epstein was there because his black airplane was at the airport. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. So anyway, let's jump into the actual news. So yeah, that was my trip to Epstein Island this past weekend. How's the chat doing? Haven't checked in on the chat in like a really long time, I feel like. And no one's complaining about my audio, so I think I'm okay. And yes, I'm pretty sunburnt, but it is what it is. That's what happens. That's what happens when you send a Scotch Irishman to the Caribbean for an extended period of time. So let's start with the place that I would, for me, it's like a lot of this stuff begins in terms of the past week of news. And that's this story. Trump says, Abu Balal al-Manouki, second in command of ISIS globally, killed in U.S. Nigerian operation. And I have the actual post right here. This was posted on May 15th, so 4 days ago, which was Friday. Tonight, at my direction, brave American forces and the armed forces of Nigeria flawlessly executed a meticulously planned and very complex mission to eliminate the most active terrorist in the world from the battlefield, Abu Balal al-Manouki, second in command of ISIS globally, thought he could hide in Africa, but little did he know we had sources who kept us informed on what he was doing. He will no longer terrorize the people of Africa or help plan operations to target Americans. With his removal, ISIS's global operation is greatly diminished. Thank you to the government of Nigeria for your participation on this operation. God bless America, President Donald J. Trump. Okay, so this is an interesting development because this ties into a storyline that I feel like we've been tracking. Like I've been tracking this. And you've been tracking it along with me, but I feel like nobody else has really been tracking this West Africa thing. Even like the foreign press hasn't really been tracking it that much. It is very confusing. I'll give them that. But back in January, the last time that I went to the Caribbean, when Maduro got arrested, I made this map. Because I was chatting with all the the Badlands hosts in their private chat, and we were just talking about all this stuff after Maduro went down. And I to simplify it, because I don't think they watch my content. I think CanCon checks it out, but everyone's busy. So I was just explaining it to them very concisely, and I broke it. I simplified it. It's Einstein says if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. So teaching it, presenting it is a good way to figure out what you need to know so you can move forward. I simplified it into three conflicts: conflict A, conflict B, conflict C. So conflict A is the one that we're talking about here. This is the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES versus ECOWAS, which is the economic. What does it stand for? The Economic Community of West African States, which is a UN affiliated group. It's basically like a regulatory body. And whenever one of these countries steps out of line, the UN steps in and ECOWAS imposes sanctions on that one country and, makes it hard for them to trade and basically starves their people, much like you see happening like with Iran right now. And so these three countries, and I think more have joined since then, but these three countries were like, yeah, we're done with this. And so when Captain Ibrahim Traore in 2022 took control of the country through a military coup, overthrowing his own general who had taken control of the country 8 months before, in another military coup, he was like, yeah, we're done with ECOWAS. We're out. And he formed an alliance with his two neighbors. That was Burkina Faso. So he forms an alliance with Niger and Mali, who also had military coups. The Russians were backing all of them, helping them. And the reason that the military coups happened is because ISIS formed, before that it was Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram. They were plaguing these countries. They were taking over the countries. And so in early 2022, that general I mentioned, with the help of Ibrahim Traore and his the Burkinabe military, they took over the country, took over the government, because they were like, we got to drive ISIS out and the government's not doing the job it needs to do. And then after 8 months, Traore was like, hey, you're not doing it either. It's actually gotten worse. So I think he realized that guy was in bed with the deep state. And so he overthrew him. And so here's the ECOWAS map. I'm just going over some background. Some of you may know this already because I've run through this so many times, but repetition is good for retention. So this is the original ECOWAS is every country that is labeled here. And the gray countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, those are the three that broke away. See, it says former member states. These are the three that broke away and formed the Alliance of Sahel States. And ECOWAS did everything they could to stop it. They even gave them like a 6-month grace period. They're like, if you want to come back, we're going to think you're going to want to come back. And they're like, nah, we're good. And so Guinea, which is right here between Guinea-Bissau and Sierra Leone, Guinea was against sanctions against these three countries because I think they were sympathetic to why these three countries were frustrated with the UN. And so they got suspended. They're like on a suspended status, and I think they're still suspended. The suspension might have been lifted, but I don't know what that means. Maybe they got sanctions of their own. But basically, it's like nobody's allowed to have their own sovereignty. Everyone has to listen to the UN. Everyone has to listen to ECOWAS, and this is basically how you implement globalism, because there's a centralized command. It all goes back to Brussels. It all goes back to the UN, right? And from Brussels, they disseminate, here's the rules for the rules-based international order that we expect you to follow. And if you don't comply with those rules and those expectations, we're going to sanction you. And what a sanction means is that other countries aren't allowed to trade with you, which means your people starve. And that's what happened. And so it makes perfect sense that, with good men in charge of a country of starving people who don't have electricity, like 80% of Burkina Faso does not have electricity. Half of them don't have indoor plumbing. Eventually, good men are going to pick up arms and fight back. That's what happened in 1776. But apparently saying that out loud is like makes you a glowy. Saying that out loud makes you a bad person in 2026 because we're all a bunch of domesticated scrubs. But that's what happened. And so they rebelled against ECOWAS. Now, because of that, these three countries have been vilified by the mainstream media, including Fox News has vilified these three countries. Captain Traore, the U.S. military, up until recently, has vilified them. The combatant commander of AFRICOM said some very disparaging things about Traore. It was either a year or two ago. Thomas Langley, General Thomas Langley, and he was slapped down because he called the guy a criminal. He called Captain Traore a criminal and said he should be arrested, that we should go in there with special forces and arrest him, and which is just false. Like the guy's not a criminal. He's not committing war crimes. And he was forced to publicly apologize because he said that in like a Senate intelligence hearing, like a Senate hearing. So anyway, there are just so many frustrating aspects of our government and our military. And I know that we all want to think that everyone in our military are good guys, but they're just not. There are plenty of bad guys in our military. And you're seeing a lot of them getting purged. A lot of them have been purged by Pete Hegseth rather recently. Remember, it was the Air Force who fought back and tried to stop Space Force from being formed during the first Trump administration. They did everything they could to stop Space Force from happening. So there are plenty of bad guys in the military, and we have to remember that. So anyway, let's back up and let's talk about this terrorist. Abu Balal al-Manouki. Okay, so what is he most famous for? Well, I think my understanding is what he is most well known for. Let me pull the comments up. What's up, chat? T. Gretzky just asked, who was it in Congress that asked the general about all the African soldiers the U.S. had trained that ended up turning into dictatorships? That was Matt Gaetz. And that was during that same situation. I think, yeah. So because it was Matt Gaetz, that means it would have been 2 years ago. So it was 2 years ago that happened. Good memory, T. Gretzky. And Matt Gaetz asked him, he said, why is it that we keep bringing these generals and these officers from Africa to our soil and training them and putting them in school and educating them, and then they go home and they become terrorists and they become warlords and they lead? And General Langley was like, well, it doesn't actually happen as much as you think. And then Matt Gaetz started naming statistics and was like, actually, this is how often it happens. And he started naming people and naming countries. And Thomas Langley acted like he had no idea. He was like, well, I'm going to have to verify all that. And Matt Gaetz said, I don't need you to verify it. It's verified. I'm asking you, why is it happening? And the guy had no answer, and he looked like a total dumbass. And that's one of the reasons that AFRICOM is getting shut down. They're going to consolidate AFRICOM into, I think, EURACOM. I think they're going to consolidate EURACOM and AFRICOM into one. My understanding is that we're going to go from like 11 combatant commands to I think 7. I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to streamline it. But anyway, I digress. So let's talk about this Abu Balal al-Manouki. And so this is a story from the BBC from March 2018. Kidnapped Dapchi schoolgirls freed in Nigeria. So the background here is that in 2014, Boko Haram kidnapped hundreds of schoolgirls from various schools. Like they went to schools with young girls, ages, I don't know, they were like 11, 14, that age range, probably younger. And they just kidnapped the whole school girls, like 100 girls at a time. And they took at least 300 or 400 is from what I read. And these girls were probably trafficked. They were probably put into all kinds of bad situations. There were stories, the girls were told stories about some of the girls being like run over and crushed to death by armored vehicles during this kidnapping process, and just these terrible, traumatic situations that these little girls had to live through. And for 4 years, these girls were missing. And then in 2018, Nigerian forces went in and saved all 110 girls that were taken from this one village. They were all returned. And it says 101 of them were reunited with their families. And so my speculation is that the U.S. Special Forces were involved in this, because this time frame, this is March of 2018. And if you go listen to the Book of Trump, the Tongo ambush, I did that. I think it was like episode 10, episode 11, something like that. You can go look it up on the playlist. I had Alpha Warrior on, and we discussed this ambush that happened that nobody knows about. And the reason nobody knows about it is because it happened right when the Vegas shooting happened. So the Vegas shooting completely took all the oxygen out of the room, obviously. And nobody knew that about the Tongo ambush, which is where I think they were Green Berets, were all killed. They might have been Delta. Were they Delta forces? Whichever they were, I think they were special forces. Yeah, it says Green Berets. They're Green Berets. So Green Berets, 4 of them were killed, and basically they were sent into the situation. And they were in Tongo, Niger, which is right near the border of Nigeria. And they were sent into the situation by the Pentagon, and they were forced to just stand out in the brush. They had no air support. They had it was like all the protocols that were commonly followed were broken. And finally, the people that they were supposed to be meeting didn't show up to the meeting, and they were like, we got to get out of here. Something doesn't feel right. And they had a bunch of Nigerian military guys with them. And so all of a sudden ISIS shows up and ambushes them, and there's this big firefight. I think there were 8 guys total, and 4 of them were killed, 8 Green Berets, and 4 of them were killed. Very much like the Benghazi. It was like the Benghazi incident, and they were trying to pin it all. The media was trying to pin it all on Trump. I think that these guys were probably, my guess is that they were probably helping out with this situation as well, getting these little girls back. But those little girls were originally kidnapped by Abu Balal al-Manouki back in 2014. This is like the thing he's most famous for, is kidnapping all these little girls. And that was when he was the leader of Boko Haram. Now, back then, Boko Haram was affiliated with Al-Qaeda. They weren't, ISIS wasn't a thing yet as much in West Africa. It was in North Africa, but it wasn't, this is just right after. This is 2014. So this isn't that long after the Arab Spring, which is when ISIS was created. Here's a map showing, when is this? I think this map is from 2016. So yeah, this map is showing, the orange. This is the main area for insurgency. So you see the insurgency. Actually, I think no, I'm sorry. This map is from 2026, because now we have Chad and Mauritania, which are 2 states that I believe are trying to join the Sahel Alliance. So I guess they're called the G5 now. But you can see where this orange is where they operate. So the orange is this is ISIS all right here in Mali. This is all ISIS, right? And then down here, this little, like around Lake Chad, this is Boko Haram. But then there's also insurgency action over here by Niamey. Okay. And so I think Tongo, let me pull up the map. Let's just nail this down. I think Tongo is in West Niger. I want to make sure I get this right. It's been a while since I've done that rabbit hole. Yep, here it is. Okay. So there's Tongo. Okay, so it's right on the border of Mali, but it's very close. It's by the capital. This is the capital, Niamey, of Niger, and then Nigeria is right here. Okay, so there's a ton of insurgency activity right here, and this is where these guys get killed, these Green Berets, and then after the AES rebels against ECOWAS and leaves the organization, leaves the UN effectively. These insurgency groups just like intensify. They get way, way worse. It's like pouring gasoline on them. This is like 2023. And that's when ECOWAS and the UN say, hey, you know what? This is getting so out of control in Niger. We should probably go in militarily to Niamey and save Niger. And so they were calling for an invasion of Niger, not to punish the people of Niger or their government necessarily, but to save them from these radical Islamic terrorists, right? So that's the Hegelian dialectic, because we have this. This is from November of 2024. Russia accuses Ukraine of openly supporting African terrorists. Russia will continue to fight against Kiev's unacceptable support of international terrorism after Ukrainian officials admitted to and then attempted to walk back their involvement in a deadly raid in Mali. A top Russian diplomat has told a ministerial session of the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum. Some 40 ministers and 1,500 other participants from across Africa took part in the forum held in the Syria's federal territory outside the Black Sea city of Sochi this weekend. The acting head of the Russian Foreign Ministry's Department for New Challenges and Threats, Georgy Mikno, addressed the conference on Saturday, accusing Ukraine of supporting international terrorism. Quote, the destructive activities of the criminal Kiev regime, which openly supports terrorist groups in Africa, must not go unnoticed. Mikno told the forum, adding that Russia will continue fighting against this unacceptable practice in Africa and globally. Kiev publicly implicated itself in the July incident in Mali when Tuareg insurgents ambushed and killed dozens of Malian forces and personnel from Russia's Wagner Group, the diplomat insisted. Quote, this is why the decision by the Republic of Mali and Niger to immediately sever diplomatic relations with Kiev is absolutely logical in our opinion, he added. And so this is a picture of that was posted online by the terrorists. And it's of all of like these dead African soldiers, but also Russian soldiers, these Wagner Group guys who were fighting with them and training them. And then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a Ukrainian politician, I think it might have even been like the ambassador, like quote posted it and was like spiking the football and was like, oh, this is fantastic. Yeah, like Ukraine is all about this. Like we love this stuff. And so let's see. Here's a month before that, October 10th, 2024. Kiev trained Mali militants. Le Monde. This is from a French newspaper. Ukrainian spy service has been sharing drone warfare technologies with rebels in Mali to help them kill Russian security contractors fighting for the African country's military-led government. French newspaper Le Monde reported on Thursday. The expose describes cooperation between Kiev's HUR military intelligence agency and the strategic framework for the defense of the people of Azawad, a coalition of predominantly Tuareg militant forces based in northern Mali. The government in Bamako uses the services, that's the capital Mali, of the Wagner private military company, and Ukraine decided to get involved in the fighting to target Russian personnel using the Tuareg forces as proxies, according to the article. Yeah, and then, I mean, I've been covering this for years, and so I recall we got pictures and videos another time of these same terrorists, these same militant groups They had Ukrainian drones, and they had with instruction manuals written in Ukrainian. And like the Russian soldiers were sitting there being like, these is Ukrainian weapons, Ukrainian literature. These guys are literally getting weapons from Ukraine. And what's strange is that if you stop and you think about it, like, I thought Ukraine was like fighting for its life against Russia, like in like this existential conflict. How could they possibly have the resources to divert personnel, because there were guys down there training these people, like training these terrorists to fight the Russians, personnel, weapons, money? How could they afford to spare any of that if they're fighting for their life against the Russian military? And the answer is, in my opinion, is the money that we sent to Ukraine. This money was always earmarked. The reason that we sent hundreds of billions of dollars to Ukraine is because half of that money actually needed to go elsewhere to finance this kind of stuff, because the deep state, the uniparty, the people that Lindsey Graham works for, had lost control of their precious resources, the gold in Burkina Faso, the uranium in Niger, the oil in Mali. And so they needed to regain control of that by overthrowing these governments and retaking control of the governments. And so the Republican Party, which I don't understand why people are still loyal to that thing, the Republican Party knowingly did this. They sent money. They demanded our money get sent to Africa to finance ISIS. And the fact that we're not talking about this openly, the Republican congressmen should be pummeled with these questions every single time they show their face in public. They shouldn't be allowed to speak in front of a microphone without questions being shouted at them about why are we financing ISIS in Africa via Ukraine. I mean, Lindsey Graham loves to pontificate about Muslims and killing Muslims and how much he loves killing Muslims. It's like, why are we financing them, Lindsey? Oh, okay, because you yourself are actually unlawful enemy combatant. That's the truth. That's the answer. So let's back up now and go back to what happened here. You'll recall, like going back to this map, this is the start of the French military intervention on January 13th, 2013. So if you back up to 2011, remember, we get a news story from Al Jazeera, right, telling us that, and this was after a bunch of fake news had come out about Gaddafi and all this stuff that Gaddafi was doing that he didn't actually do. We found out later. But the straw that broke the camel's back in the eyes of NATO was that the report from Al Jazeera that Gaddafi was giving his soldiers Viagra and telling them to rape women in villages that were loyal to his opposition, like the terrorist groups, basically. And remember, these are like the terrorist groups that are trying to overthrow Gaddafi. These are the guys who would eventually become ISIS. But these are all these little terror cells that he's fighting all over Libya, because Libya is Gaddafi's country right here. All right. And so when the French hear this, when NATO hears it, they're like, this is unacceptable. We have to go in now. And so NATO then, that was the first time NATO had ever set boots officially. I mean, I'm sure they were doing it unofficially before, officially put boots on the ground in Africa for their first African operation. That was 2011. And that was to help overthrow Gaddafi and take control of Libya. Libya is now completely run by ISIS. There's slave markets in Tripoli, slave markets in Benghazi. Like, you can buy slaves just on the street corner. It's a totally just total anarchy. It's a failed state. The definition of a failed state. That's what NATO did. NATO did that. Our tax dollars paid for that. So then NATO then goes to and the UN, basically they're trying to recolonize. They're trying to reimpose themselves on West Africa, because remember, this entire area effectively was controlled by the French Empire 200 years ago, 100 years ago. And so they're trying to reimpose themselves on that. So what do? They go and they throw money at all these different groups, at all these different terrorist groups, to stir up trouble and cause problems. And then the French military, which was already on, the French military operating as UN peacekeepers, but also as NATO. It's NATO/UN working together to resolve this. They're like, oh, well, we're already in the area. Why don't we just go ahead and just roll in there and we'll take care of this? And so then they come in and they occupy this area, right? And then you'll recall that after that, we got in 2015 a guy named Anders Campos. Compass. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. He was suspended because he turned is a UN like aid worker who turned whistleblower, and he was basically exposing the fact that there is this massive pedophile ring in Africa that was being run by UN peacekeepers, the French soldiers who were there on behalf of the UN and NATO, and they were basically like kidnapping little girls and probably boys too, and trafficking them and raping them. And this became a huge scandal in 2015. Now the abuses took place in 2014, right? But again, the reason that they were justifying their presence there was because of terrorist organizations that our State Department was probably financing. I mean, we need to get the actuals to we need to get the financial transactions to actually validate everything I'm saying here. But I think the logic very much adds up. So it was happening in the Central African Republic. It was happening in Niger. It was happening all over the place in Africa, where these French soldiers were. This guy ends up getting in trouble. Anders Campos, I think this guy was like a do-gooder. He was like a do-gooder, worked for the UN aid, whatever. Probably thought he was saving the world, but found out he actually was raping the world. And he actually gets in trouble. He gets in trouble for doing this, for blowing the whistle on a pedophile ring. Okay. And so this is what starts the African counterinsurgency against the French, where Africa is like, you know what? We're done. We're absolutely done with you, France. We're done with you, UN. We're done with you, NATO. Get the hell out of our country. And so Russia comes in, and Russia starts shipping them weapons. Eventually, this is during Trump's first administration. They start, they boost their aid. Russia boosts their aid to West Africa. They're sending them weapons. They eventually send in the Wagner Group. They're sending in Russian military. They're doing propaganda campaigns to counter the ISIS campaigns. And then eventually Wagner gets boots on the ground and starts training these guys, and then works with them to overthrow these governments. And that's how the Alliance of Sahel States is formed. And so then as you get the Alliance of Sahel States, and so we're going to go back to this map. This is the battle map. Okay. This is the battle map, the gray versus the orange. With Nigeria, remember, Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa. It is where it is also has the biggest economy in Africa. So it is like, when you look at Africa as a continent, which is a huge continent, you can fit like China, Russia, the United States, and parts of Europe in it, like in Africa, and still have space left over. It's the center of like activity and population is Nigeria. I mean, of course, the Nile is historically a very populated area, as is South Africa. And then, of course, North Africa has always historically been populated, going back 10,000 years. But Nigeria is like where all of like this, like the heart of it all, right? That's where the UN's seat of power is. That's where all the operations are run out of. I think that's where like all the Gladio stuff, all of the regime change stuff is run out of Nigeria. And so this war between the gray and the orange begins, and you get multiple attempts to overthrow Niger, Burkina Faso, Mali. You will recall recently we had, what did we have? A failed coup in Benin, in this country right here. We had reports from like Catholic bishops in Nigeria who were saying that ISIS was like, or whatever, Islamic terrorists were allowed to just run rampant and kill anybody, Christians, Muslims, whoever, in Western Nigeria. And the government was doing nothing. The police were doing nothing. The people who actually were saving them were, it was the Burkinabe military, Captain Traore, a Muslim army coming in to kill the Muslims, saving the Christians from the Muslims, from the Muslim terrorists, right? Yeah, I mean, that's the conflict. And so the two seats of power, as I understand it, in ECOWAS is Nigeria and Ivory Coast. Ivory Coast is the other kind of center of power. I think there's like some courts and some UN agencies and stuff in Ivory Coast. And so when Trump comes in, you recall that last year Trump was talking about Nigeria better get their shit together. Like, why are all these Christians being killed in Nigeria? He's referring to the thing that I just mentioned, right? He's referring to the fact that ISIS is, or Boko Haram, whoever, is just being allowed to run around and just kill people and kill Christians and kidnap Christians. Better get your shit together, Nigeria, or else I'm going to start bombing Nigeria. He said that. I'm going to start bombing Nigeria. And then remember, Lindsey Graham was licking his chops like, oh, yes, another war. We should definitely start bombing Nigeria. It doesn't matter. Nigeria is like their proxy. Like, they don't care. They overthrow their own governments all the time just to make a point, just to keep the wheels greased, right, on the military industrial complex. It doesn't matter to them. They're selling weapons. They're making money. They're killing people, most importantly. And so this joint operation against this terrorist group in Nigeria, working with Nigeria to kill him, is being presented in the mainstream media as like, ooh, like the Alliance of Sahel States better pay attention because Trump is teaming up with Nigeria and ECOWAS, and that means the U.S. military might have to flex on these rebels who are in rebellion against the UN. But remember, Trump is no friend of the UN. The Republican Party is currently trying to defund the UN because the UN is doing what? They're sanctioning, or they're talking about sanctioning Israel. Remember, the UN is now against Israel, right? So this is the game theory. Like, Trump has turned the Republican establishment against the UN because the UN has been turned against Israel. And so because Israel, of course, is like at the top of the pyramid and the holiest of holies in terms of the deep state, the Republican Party, of course, hates the UN now. And so the idea that Trump is teaming up the UN is nonsense. What he's doing is he's going in there and he's cleaning up in my opinion, he's cleaning up the State Department's mess because they funded all this crap. And this al-Manouki character is just a demonstration that I actually think this is evidence that Trump and Putin are running a pincer on the State Department, on the CIA, because al-Manouki, I have no doubt that guy is probably a creation of the State Department. If we were to run down that guy's entire bio, he probably has been trained by the CIA at some point to do something positive, and then it turned negative. That story is as old as time. Let me see. I think I had a few other things on this. Okay, so counterinsurgency initiative. Let me see if I have language on that. Okay, so here's the Nigerian army posting about it. Operation Hadin Kai and U.S. partners neutralize ISIS global second in command Abu Balal al-Manouki and several terrorist commanders. Says that Abu Bakr ibn Muhammad ibn Ali al-Manouki was a U.S. specially designated global terrorist, designated by the U.S. Department of State on June 8th, 2023, under Executive Order 13224 for his role in a leading official within ISIS's General Directorate of Provinces, through which he channeled international funding and operational guidance to terror cells across the Sahel and the Lake Chad Islands in northern Borno. His elimination represents the single most consequential counter-terrorist operation or outcome in the Northeast theater since the inception of Operation Hadin Kai. Let me see. So let me just gather my thoughts here. Abu Bakr, yeah, they all call themselves Abu Bakr. That has to do with like the Prophet Muhammad's best friend's name was named Abu Bakr. Because remember Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi? That was John McCain's buddy, the original leader of ISIS, who John McCain went and met with in Syria, and made sure he got all the funding he needed. By the way, Marco Rubio went on that trip. Remember that, Marco? Marco Rubio was in Libya meeting when John McCain met with the leaders of ISIS in Libya. That's a little awkward, Marco. Don't know what to make of that. Well, I do know what to make of it. If you're there meeting with terrorists, that's bad news bears. Why are you meeting with terrorists, Marco? But the Republican Party loves terrorists as long as those terrorists justify military intervention, which is what these guys were doing. When they designated them. Now, I can't speak to what the intent was when they were designated global terrorists, but once you designate them global terrorists, you then get where was it? Okay, so what did I just read? I just read June 8th. So June 8th, 2023, under Executive Order 13224, right, which I assume Joe Biden signed. This guy is designated, al-Manouki, is designated a global terrorist, okay? 2 months later, look what we got here. Where are we at? Right here. 2 months later, West African bloc prepared for military intervention after Niger coup. ECOWAS says it is ready. This is August 17th, 2023, 2 months after that guy is designated a terrorist. ECOWAS says it is ready to restore democracy and describes President Mohamed Bazoum as a hostage. A West African regional political grouping has reiterated it is prepared to intervene militarily in Niger following last month's coup, describing the country's detained president Mohamed Bazoum as a terrorist, as a hostage. ECOWAS's Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Abdel Fattah Musa, which is the guy in the picture right here, made the comments as military chiefs of staff from the bloc met in the Ghanaian capital, Accra, on Thursday and accused Niger's military junta of playing cat and mouse with the grouping by refusing to meet its envoys. The meeting in Accra, which had originally been planned for last weekend, was called to discuss the details of the standby military force authorized by ECOWAS when a deadline to release Bazoum and restore democracy expired. While Musa emphasized that armed intervention was the last resort should diplomatic efforts fail, he said a military operation remained on the table and amid skepticism over ECOWAS's willingness to intervene despite strong recent language. Let me see. And then this one, this is August 10th, a week before. West African leaders activate standby force to put pressure on the junta in Niger. So these guys were basically using these terrorists and the destabilization that was occurring, right, as the reason that we need to go intervene and we need to go take over militarily their country. But remember, the whole reason that these juntas were formed, the whole reason that the AES came into power and seized control was because of these terrorist groups threatening their country, right? And destabilizing their country. So it's like the good guys are these military juntas, and then here comes the deep state running up right next to them, getting in front of them when you're taking the picture and saying, oh, we're actually the good guys because we're the ones fighting the military junta. What Trump and I think the Sovereign Alliance has done is they've taken these stupid little Hegelian dialectics that the State Department creates, right? And they've injected themselves both in the middle of them, but also on the outside of them. Trump sidesteps the dialectics all the time, creates his own dialectics, but then he also injects himself in the middle of it. Or I should say Putin more often does that. And then Trump kind of like operates outside of the dialectic. But that's basically what's happened here. Okay. Now, let's just stay on Africa for a minute because I think we've beaten this horse dead. Let's go to, well, this is interesting. This is Nigeria gripped by, this is from today, legal battle over fuel imports. The country's fuel sector is a multiplayer competitive system developed over years and not a monopoly, marketers group has said. Nigeria's leading fuel marketers have pushed back against a lawsuit by Degonto Petroleum refineries seeking to annul fuel import licenses, warning the legal action could destabilize supply and competition in the country's downstream sector. So I don't really know what to make of this, but the fact that Nigeria is experiencing a disruption for their energy status quo is a signal to me that, I mean, this is all connected to what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz. Very interesting. It says last week Dagante filed a lawsuit in the federal high court in Lagos, that's the capital of Nigeria, against the government, aiming to nullify import licenses issued by the Nigerian midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory authority to independent marketers in the state-owned Nigerian National Petroleum Company. Dangote argues that the permits undermine its operations and violate the Petroleum Industry Act by allowing imports despite its refining capacity. In response to the Depot and Petroleum Products Marketers Association of Nigeria said the licenses are legal instruments essential to the West African nation's fuel supply chain. Quote, these licenses exist to protect supply security, not to disadvantage any single producer. The association said in a statement on Sunday, invalidating the permits retroactively could introduce uncertainty into the entire downstream supply chain at a moment when Nigeria can least afford it. So again, I don't know who any of these people are in this situation, but what I'm pulling from this is that basically you have a guy here who is a producer. He has a good market share. He likes the status quo, and the regulators have introduced a bunch of new players into the market. And this guy doesn't like that because now his dominance, his market dominance is going to be challenged. And this is going to happen. This is happening all over the world. This is going to happen everywhere. Like, this is the breaking of the status quo. And so are there any quote unquote good guys in this situation? I don't know. I don't really care. There doesn't need to be. It's the incentive structure that has been overthrown, right? Because the incentive structure is that, hey, we need more oil because there's an oil shortage, right? Because of this global supply squeeze. We need to bring in more oil, which means we need to bring in more players who can do so. And then the existing players who have dominated the market are going to be very upset about that. And you're seeing this, by the way, with big oil in America as well. Some of them are upset about what's happening with, some of them are very happy. Some of them are very upset with Nigeria and with Iran. All right, let's pull up what's happening in Congo, because this is like getting all over this is now like all over the place. Where are we? Right here. Okay. So if we go back to the map, the original map that I showed you, this map. Okay. So we just finished talking about conflict A. Okay. Conflict B is the Democratic Republic of Congo, specifically the eastern portion of it, where all of those, $24 trillion of rare earth minerals that were long controlled by oligarchs in the mostly Israeli oligarchs. And those licenses were taken away from them and taken over by others. We've had multiple attempts to overthrow that government, that government that has been working with Trump since his first administration. And all of those attempts to overthrow that government have failed. So then we had ISIS and other M23, these proxy groups come in from Rwanda and take control of these refining towns, these towns where all the minerals are brought to for refinement and then sold into the marketplace. They've taken control of the refineries. They've taken control of the towns, which effectively gives them access to the minerals. They can then steal the minerals, take them into Rwanda. They can launder them by giving them fake certificates saying that they're totally legit. And then they turn around and they sell the minerals to Sony. They sell the minerals to Apple. They sell the minerals to all the military industrial complex players, all the defense contractors, to make high technology. And Apple is currently being investigated by the European authorities for participating in that and knowingly participating in that. So even though they've taken control of these towns and they're fighting now with the the DRC army and other African armies, we're now seeing disease being introduced. Probably biowarfare is my guess is what we're dealing with here. And by the way, I should have showed you this one. Here is a Substack by this guy, Andrew Koribko. I don't know who that is, but his name's familiar. I think he's probably written plenty of nice things about the Uniparty, but it says the U.S. joint operation against ISIS in Nigeria sends a message to the Sahelian Alliance. So here's somebody explicitly saying that Trump is sending a message to the three guys on screen here, the guy on the right being Captain Ibrahim Traore, that, hey, we're coming for you. You better watch out. But I think that's total bullshit. I think it's the complete opposite. But what do I know? All right, so now we go to this. So this map, the fast spreading Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. And so it's showing you a map here, which is kind of hard to orient yourself. This is Africa. They've cut off the top and the bottom, but we were just looking at ECOWAS. Here's ECOWAS right here. Here's Nigeria. The dark gray, you can see like your map key right here. The dark gray, the darker the gray, the more like concentrated the Ebola, they're saying, right? And then like they call that likely Ebola reservoirs, where Ebola is gonna like be found. Or you're gonna catch it. And then the blue circles are case outbreaks. So there's not really that many case outbreaks among ECOWAS, except for this giant blue circle where it says major epidemic in 2014, 2016, with more than 28,600 cases reported in West Africa. So then you come over here to the DRC and you see a bunch of blue circles in the exact region that we've been talking about for years now. We've been talking about Kivu, right? North Kivu, South Kivu. And so we've been talking more recently, we've been talking about Ituri, which is the province north of Kivu, because that's where ISIS is now operating. You have ISIS in Ituri, and then you have M23 group operating in Kivu. And now we have this red circle is the current outbreak. 516 suspected cases in Ituri, and 1 in North Kivu, and 2 in Kampala, which is in Uganda. So there's only been 1 case in North Kivu, and they're bringing a ton of attention to it. And like, this is a really, really big deal. And oh, here we go. Like, look, a bat. What are they saying? Are they saying a bat had sex with a gorilla? It looks like that might be what they're claiming. And then they're showing you all these really scary charts to show you how it's spreading and how serious it is. And look, I mean, Ebola is nothing to mess around with, but my question is just who is poisoning these people? Because there's just no coincidences in this world. And when this exact area that has been such a place of focus for the deep state ever since Trump issued Executive Order 13818 and froze the assets of Dan Gertler, which effectively stopped the operations from mining in this province, there's just been all hands on deck to try to reclaim control of the situation. So a rare strain of Ebola has prompted the World Health Organization to declare a public health emergency of international concern. Most of the cases have occurred in the Democratic Republic of Congo, with at least 131 fatalities associated with the outbreak. There have been 516 suspected cases and 33 confirmed cases in Congo, according to a daily bulletin published by health authorities, and 2 confirmed cases in neighboring Uganda. The head of the World Health Organization expressed deep concern on Tuesday at the speed and scale of the Ebola outbreak as the number of cases rises. The current Ebola outbreak is due to a rare strain of the virus known as Bundibugyo. I know I didn't say that right. Named after Uganda's Bundibugyo province, where it was first identified during an outbreak in 2007, 2008. A second Bundibugyo outbreak occurred in 2012 in the DRC. Bundibugyo is one of 4 species of Ebola virus genus that cause life-threatening illness in humans. All Ebola viruses are transmitted through direct contact with the bodily fluids of infected animals or humans or objects contaminated with such fluids. And then it just goes on to rattle off a bunch of stats. Yeah, and so the hantavirus must not be going the way they wanted it to go, because they were really hoping that they were going to be able to milk that cow, but I don't think they're going to. So anyway, that's conflict A and conflict B. That's conflict A, conflict B. Conflict C is also happening. We'll save conflict C. We'll talk about conflict C if we go back to, we'll talk about that maybe on Friday, because there is stuff happening there with Sudan, So conflict C over here is like Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia. There, and that directly is impacted by the Middle East. Like the UAE is involved there, Saudi Arabia is involved there. The U.S. State Department is involved in all that. We'll open up that can of worms on Friday because we've spent enough time in Africa today. But we've talked about conflict A and we've touched on conflict B. But conflict B basically now looks like it's just turned into biowarfare. Okay. So let's do this. Let's listen to bomb.
What up, Badlanders? Are you ready to rock something new in 2026? Well, as always, we got you covered with the Rise Badlands Native Collection. Built from the rich tones and rugged terrain of the Dakotas, equal parts beautiful and brutal. Old roots, new vibe. Whether you got gators in your backyard or you have to take a bush plane to the post office, Badlanders are worldwide. Different dirt, same tribe. Speaking of different dirt, the ghost of Base Patrick Henry designed a plan for the border wall that he actually sent to the White House. It's friggin' hilarious. Now you can get it on a shirt, hoodie, and more. And don't forget, every order throws fuel on the fire of the Made in USA parallel economy. So grab something now at badlandsmedia.tv/rise.
Ready to upgrade your daily routine with truly clean, natural products, no exceptions? Start in the kitchen with Van Man's Pure Cooking Tallow, perfect for high heat cooking and adding rich, clean flavor to your meals. For your daily cleanse, try their gentle tallow soaps, the classic honey, pine tar, or coconut. These bars deliver a rich, natural lather that leaves your skin feeling clean, soft, and refreshed. Give your smile real care with Miracle Tooth Powder in flavors like Mint Bone, China Bone, or Original. Customers rave about whiter, stronger teeth and fresher breath with no harsh chemicals. Van Man also offers great products like hair care, eye cream, and more, all made with clean, natural ingredients, no exceptions. Right now, enjoy free U.S. shipping on orders over $40. Head to badlandsmedia.tv/vanman today. That's badlandsmedia.tv/vanman.
Today we remember those who gave everything. And memory is never still.
This Memorial Day! One hero, one mission to deliver softness to America!
No, Chi-Chi, we can't stop for snacks, dude. We have to deliver all of these soft disclosure gift cards.
He goes by Zach Kane.
The motion detector!
Stop fighting over the beer brush.
life finds a way.
Hydrate your elbows, moisturize your soul. Feel the rhythm together. You feel alive and let the lotion roll. Soft disclosure, hear the cry. Maximum softness, do or die.
Muffin, hit it.
It not unfolding in the Middle East, because we've been rugged once again. We've been deprived of the war that we were promised. Everyone said, Trump said the clock is ticking, tick tock. We're about to have another war in Iran. The Republicans were so excited. The neocons were so excited. They thought that there was going to be another war in Iran. The Israelis were just over the moon. And then Trump posted this, where he said that he was asked by Tamim al-Thani, the emir of Qatar, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, and Mohammed bin Zayed, the president of the UAE, to hold off on planned military attacks, which were scheduled for today, and that serious negotiations are now taking place, and that in their opinion, as great leaders and allies, a deal will be made, which will be very acceptable to the United States of America, and as well to all countries in the Middle East. And so here's Trump's guys. These are Trump's guys. Tamim, MBS, MBZ. I've been talking about Tamim and MBS so much. Y'all should be very familiar with them by now. MBZ too. And so this kind of flies in the face of all these people who were, the Zionists who were all shilling and saying that the Arabs really wanted this war and they wanted to attack. It just didn't make any sense. Made no sense whatsoever. And actually, let me see if I pull this up. Sorry, I should have had this prepared. This was from last week. I think it's this Badlands Substack. I know I linked it in the Substack. Saudi? Yep. Okay, so we got so I found this write-up, this article from an NGO. I don't think I shared this last week. I may have. I don't think I did though. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But oh no, I did share it. I talked about it. The Council on Middle East Affairs, the guy wrote up the article being like, hey, there is no incentive here for the Arabs to want to fight Iran. That's just stupid. They're not going to fight Iran. That's their new incentive structure is actually to make peace with Iran. And that's the way it is. And so, of course, I think significant resources have been dedicated to confuse the public on that, deceive the public into thinking that the Arabs actually want to fight Iran. But they in no way benefit from a war happening in their neighborhood, even if they somehow were able to keep themselves out of it and they didn't suffer at all, like they didn't receive any bombings. Just having bombs dropping around their country, even outside of their borders, is not good for business. That's just business 101. Don't start a business in a neighborhood where bombs are being dropped. That's They teach you that, I think, maybe in year two of business school. But yeah, don't start a business in a neighborhood where bombs are being dropped. But for a lot of people, this is like a revelation, I guess. This is like really, really big news. And so the Arabs, who everybody, I mean, I've been told my entire life that these people are bloodthirsty and that they're Muslims and therefore they want to kill everything in front of them. But here they are seeking peace. I'm very confused by this because the Zionists assured me, the neocons assured me that if you put a living thing in front of a Muslim, the Muslim's going to want to kill it. And yet the Muslims are the ones actually creating the peace, right? And it's actually the Zionists, which are a confederation of Jews and Christians and atheists, I'm sure, and Satanists, I'm sure. They're actually the ones who seem like they want to kill everything in front of them because Israel is very upset about all this. In fact, should we go check in on Mark 11 and let's see what Mark 11's saying. Because Trump had no issue using his proxy to put this out. We'll get to the proxy in a minute. Let's just check in on 11. I just got on X and everyone's talking about this Massey thing. I haven't followed it at all today, so I don't know what's happening. We'll find out. I'll wait until we find out tomorrow. I don't need a minute by minute update. So it looks like Levin's dedicated his day to posting about Massey. Okay. Yep. More Massey. So he's not. I was expecting him to be more upset about. Like literally, this is all about Massey. Mamdani. Massey. Wow, this guy's like obsessed with this. Okay, I mean more. They're just like, Taiwan. So it looks like for now, here he is. Okay, so here he is. So I knew he was going to post about this at some point. This is from 21 hours ago. All those posts I just scrolled through were just in the past 21 hours. This guy posts more than like a 15-year-old girl. So he quote posts that post that I just went through, and he said, "And I thought Israel and Netanyahu controlled POTUS and war decisions. What will the Jew haters and Trump bashers say now? Answer: it won't matter. They'll keep it up." Okay, but I suspect that we're going to see Israel continue fighting without the U.S. And to that point, let's see. And by the way, like I never at any point said that Netanyahu controls Trump. I think Netanyahu and the Israel lobby controls the Republican Party for sure, but I've never once said that they control Trump, and that's kind of the that's the catch. So it looks like, yeah, I mean, they're going into campaign mode too. So they're all shilling for like the October election already, and a lot of jockeying for that. I think they're all waiting to see what happens with Massey. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of internal domestic stuff happening there, but we'll see what happens. My guess is that we're going to see something unfold that's going to justify Israel continuing their war with Iran, and I think Trump's going to walk out of the room, and Israel will continue. But that's something that I've speculated for a while. Okay, so let's go. I guess before we get to South America, let's go to Asia, because Trump went and met with Xi last week, right? And they signed some economic deals. We're not going to go through the economic deals right now, but I saw that a lot, like the Fox News was hyperventilating over it. They were very, very upset. Laura Ingraham was very, very upset that we might be doing economic deals with Xi. And then, of course, now Putin is going to China. Says Xi to host old friend Putin as China projects stable global role after Trump visit. China to host Russia's Putin after Trump's high-profile visit. Putin visits Beijing from May 19th through the 20th, his 25th trip to China. Putin expected to seek closer energy cooperation with China. Okay. And let's see. So Chinese leader Xi Jinping is set to host his old friend Vladimir Putin less than a week after President Trump's high-profile visit, as Beijing seeks to project itself as a stable and predictable power in a world shaken by trade tensions, wars, and an energy crisis. China and Russia have cast Putin's two-day trip this week, his 25th visit to China, as further evidence of their all-weather partnership, even as the West urges Beijing to pressure Moscow into hiding its war in Ukraine. Let's see. While China presents itself as a peace mediator in the conflict and a neutral party, Putin says China and Russia support each other's core interests as he pursues additional energy deals with the world's second largest economy in the face of Western sanctions. By the way, those sanctions were the exemption was extended by the Treasury Department for Russia. We'll talk about that in a second. The Xi-Putin summit will telegraph to the world that the China-Russia strategic partnership remains the cornerstone of both countries' foreign policies, and that any attempt by the U.S. to drive a wedge between them is destined to fail, said Ian Story, principal fellow at the ISEAS Yusof Ishak Institute in Singapore. Yeah, and so they're going to do. I'm sure they're probably going to announce some big deals. So May 20th. There always seems to be a big sovereign alliance development every May 20th. And that always stands up. That's my birthday. So that always stands out in my mind whenever I see something significant develop. A lot of times it has to do with Saudi Arabia, but in the Middle East. But so I wonder, what are we going to see develop tomorrow? What's going to come out of this meeting? We'll see. But let's stay on Asia for a second, because we have, let's see, this story. Okay, so Pakistan deploys jet squadron and thousands of troops to Saudi Arabia during Iran war. This story's been out there for a while. This is from 2 days ago, but I've seen this like passed around for at least a week. That they had deployed like 8,000 troops, a bunch of JF-17 jets. And it's a big deal just because it represents this mutual defense pact. And the rumor is now that Saudi Arabia wants to bring in Qatar and they want to bring in Turkey. Let me see if I have the link to that. They're going to expand that. Let's see. Saudi, Pakistan to bring in Qatar to defense pact. Because this is the here it is from Bloomberg from a week ago. I'm pretty sure we covered this, but I'm just mentioning it. Pakistan signals Turkey, Qatar may join Saudi defense pact. So this is going to like formalize that security architecture that we've talked about so many different times. And then you'll probably see Egypt join it as well. And then I bet we'll see Iran join it. I bet you Iran is going to come in, and that's going to be like the mic drop moment where people are going to say, okay, so Iran is not actually at war with all these other countries. That's all been a lie this whole time. But let's get back to Pakistan because, oh, whoops, I stopped sharing my screen. Hold on. Whoa, what just happened to... Huh. There we go. Okay, sorry. My display screen got about the size of a quarter, so I couldn't really read anything. All right, we want to go to this story. Which one is it? Pakistan signing a deal with Iran. So the Pakistan and Iran have signed a deal that will signal that they are going to formally have a trade agreement. Let's see. And so Pakistan's deal with Iran signals that they are going to, well, I think, as I mentioned this morning at Badlands Daily, I think this is a signal that we're going to see we're going to see like a pipeline and maybe trade routes running from Iran to India via Pakistan. And by doing so, I think that is going to, number one, it solves the conflict between Pakistan and Iran, which has been long running. Baluchistan is like the area at their border where there's, there's an ethnicity that's in both countries that wants sovereignty. And then I think we will see, more importantly, the conflict between Pakistan and India resolved through this, because we have this deal. We have Iran wants to hand over nuclear stockpile to Russia. This has been a story for a long time, but Tehran has allegedly put forward idea as part of its latest peace proposal. And then the Pakistan-Iran deal is that story was, here it is. Man, I have all these, too many tabs open. All right, exclusive. Iraq, Pakistan strike energy deal with Iran as Tehran flexes Hormuz control. So this is from May 12th, but both Iraq and Pakistan have cut deals with Iran to ship oil and liquefied natural gas from the Gulf, according to 5 sources with knowledge of the matter, in a demonstration of Tehran's ability to control energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S.-Israeli war with Iran has slashed energy exports, etc. Yeah, we know all that. Quote, Iran has shifted from blocking Hormuz to controlling access to it. Hormuz is no longer a neutral transit route. It is a controlled corridor. With most of its crude exports typically shipped through the strait, Iraq was among the producers worst affected by this closure, while Pakistan, which has sought to mediate the conflict, depends heavily on Gulf energy imports and has faced surging fuel costs. In a deal between Baghdad and Tehran that has not been previously reported, Iraq secured safe passage for 2 very large crude carriers, each carrying about 2 million barrels of crude that passed through the strait on Sunday. Iraq is now working to secure Iran's approval for more transits, as Iraqi oil ministry official familiar with the initial deal and current talks told Reuters, as the government seeks to safeguard the oil revenues that make up 95% of its budget. Iraq is a close ally of Iran, and any deterioration in Iraq's economy would also damage Iran's economic interest in the country. Says Qatari LNG for Pakistan. Similarly, 2 tankers loaded with Qatari LNG are headed to Pakistan following a separate bilateral agreement between Islamabad and Tehran. 2 industry sources with knowledge of the matter told Reuters, also asking not to be named as they would not be permitted to speak with the media. Pakistan received roughly 10 LNG cargoes a month before the war and now must meet high summer electricity demand for cooling. Neither Iraq nor Pakistan has made direct payments to Iran or its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps in relation to the transits, the sources said. Qatar was not directly involved in the bilateral deals, but the 2 industry sources said, but it informed the United States ahead of the shipments to Pakistan. Pakistan's Petroleum and Information Ministries did not immediately respond to the request for comment. Neither did Qatar's foreign ministry. So it seems like, they're talking about LNG. So they're talking about maritime. They're talking about, putting energy on ships, in the form of LNG, liquefied natural gas, and shipping it through the Strait of Hormuz. But we've also heard rumors for weeks now that there are trade routes that have been opened up between Iran and Pakistan to ship energy into Pakistan and then ship it out from there. And I think in doing so, that is forcing Iran into a situation where they have to have economic entanglement with all of their neighbors. And by doing that, all the incentive is going to be more towards trade and less towards conflict. Not that Iran has not formally attacked any other country. We hear about these proxies, and these proxies have been operating, but there hasn't been like formal conflict between Iran and its neighbors. So then we get an article. Here's from May 13th. Iran and Pakistan agree to expand port cooperation, aim for a $10 billion trade. So they both announced that is definitely a thing. what I am wondering is if we're going to see, let me see, a pipeline running through Pakistan. Let's pull up the map. Right, because if we have pipelines running from Iran, because Pakistan, it says in the articles, Pakistan is heavily dependent on imports for energy. They don't produce their own energy, right? And remember, Pakistan is basically like a giant river valley. You got these mountains up here. Let's see if we can get some. We get a little bit of topography here. I don't know if the topography is showing through well, but yeah, terrain. Let's get the terrain. There we go. So you can see the like mountains right here, Himalayas up here. Right, and then you got this river valley, all this green, this river that runs down all the way to the Indian Ocean. And so I think we might see trade routes running through this river valley that go into India. And if that happens, then that's going to help mitigate the conflict between Pakistan and India. If Pakistan and India can start trading more with energy from Iran going to India, goods going from India to Iran, Pakistan acting as like the corridor between them, I think that economic entanglement is gonna remove the incentive for violent conflict, right? And that's, I think, some of the brilliance in what we're seeing President Trump do. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's go to South America. Okay, so the big news in South America, we talked about it today on Badlands Daily, so I'll try to get into as much of the details now as I can. We have Venezuela says it deported a close ally of Maduro to face criminal proceedings in the U.S. This is Alex Saab. This is a guy that we've talked about for a while now. I mean, we've been talking about him for probably the past year at least. It says that, Venezuela's government said Saturday it deported a close ally of Nicolas Maduro facing several criminal investigations in the U.S. less than 3 years after the businessman was pardoned by President Joe Biden as part of a prisoner swap. The decision marks a stark reversal for Alex Saab, whom Maduro fought tooth and nail to bring home after his previous international arrest in 2020. Now the Colombian-born insider, long described by U.S. officials as Maduro's bagman, may be asked to testify against his former protector, who is awaiting trial on drug charges in Manhattan after being captured in a shock raid by the U.S. military in January. The Venezuelan Immigration Authority, in a short statement Saturday, did not explicitly say where it had sent Saab, but said the decision was made based on several ongoing criminal investigations in the U.S. The statement's reference to Saab only as a Colombian citizen, quote unquote, appeared to be a nod to Venezuelan law, which prohibits the extradition of its nationals. Following his arrest, Venezuela's government submitted a copy of what it said was Saab's Venezuelan passport to a U.S. court, with then Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, now acting president, claiming he was an innocent Venezuelan diplomat who had been illegally kidnapped while on a humanitarian mission to Iran to circumvent the immoral imperial blockade imposed by the United States. So what they're referring to is, let's see. I think they're referring to, so when they say following his last arrest, they're talking about when he was arrested in July of 2019. In July of 2019, he was arrested in Cape Verde, actually. And, you know, guys, let's just connect even more dots. Cape Verde is right here. And guess what? Cape Verde is part of ECOWAS. So he was arrested on ECOWAS soil, and then extradited to the United States, where he was, he faced trial and then was in prison for 2 years during the Biden administration. And then the Biden administration cut a deal with Maduro to send him and others back in exchange for all of these militants who had launched failed coups, all of these like former U.S. Special Forces, and I think some allies of Maria Hakuna Matata, who the State Department desperately wanted back on U.S. soil. Let's see. So let's go back to where we were, which was here. Saab 54 amassed a fortune through Venezuelan government contracts, but he fell. Okay, so when he was arrested in Cape Verde in 2019, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said he was totally innocent. He was a diplomat. He had been sent to Cape Verde, or he had been sent to Iran to negotiate humanitarian missions, right, to Venezuela. He was trying to bring in food and circumvent like the sanctions that the U.S. had put on Venezuela, and he stopped off in Cape Verde to refuel, and that's where they got him. And so she said it was totally. She said that he was kidnapped. He was totally innocent. He was one of our diplomats. So he amassed a fortune through Venezuelan government contracts, fell out of favor with the country's new leadership that took power following Maduro's ouster. Since taking over from Maduro on January 3rd, Rodriguez demoted Saab, firing him from her cabinet and stripping him of his role as the main conduit for foreign companies looking to invest in Venezuela. For months, because he was the Minister of Industry, for months, conflicting news accounts have circulated that he was imprisoned or under house arrest. His removal to the United States is likely to deepen divisions inside Rodriguez's fragile ruling coalition of Chavistas, named for the movement started by the late Hugo Chavez. Rodriguez has generated enormous goodwill in Washington and successfully stalled any talk of new elections as she bends to the Trump administration's demands to open up its oil and mining industries to American investment. So this is the mainstream media just totally, in my opinion, totally misrepresenting what is happening. Like wishful thinking almost. I mean, you can say that like my theories and my presentations are all based on, like, you can call my analysis subjective, you can call it biased, but I at least am like presenting documents and quotes and, you know, like hard evidence to support what I'm saying. These people are literally saying this guy got arrested and he's been on house arrest with zero proof. There's no formal indictments by the Venezuelan government. There's no reports from the Venezuelan government that this guy's been arrested. They went and explicitly asked Jorge Rodriguez, Delcy Rodriguez's brother, who is the president of the parliament, and he said, I have no information on that situation. I have no idea what's going on with that. No idea. That's really strange. This guy is like, I think he's like the number 3, right? He's like the Speaker of the House, basically, in the Venezuelan government, and he says he has no idea what's going on with Saab. Nobody in the Venezuelan government has said anything publicly other than just that, oh yeah, he's been sent to the United States because they want information on him, right? But he hasn't been extradited. They were very clear that it's not an extradition because extradition is not legal for a Venezuelan citizen. It's a deportation, right? So let's pull up, because I think I linked all this in the Badlands Media Substack today. I linked all of my sourcing on all this. Because all warfare, as I start with the article, all warfare is deception. So all of this started in February with this. Caracol Radio reported that Saab had been captured. And let me see if I can translate this to English. There we go. Let me see if I can make this a little bigger. There we go. All right. Raul Gorin, who's another businessman, also identified as Nicolas Maduro's frontman, was captured along with Alex Saab in a joint operation between Chavismos and the SBI. It says, apart from the arrest of Alex Saab in the early hours of this Wednesday, February 4th, in a joint operation between the Venezuelan and United States, it was known Raul Gorin was also arrested, another Venezuelan businessman who was also identified as Nicolas Maduro's frontman. Both Saab and Gorin, they are in possession. I'm sorry, this is in Spanish, and I translated it to English, so it's a little awkward, the grammar. It says, they are in the possession of the Bolivarian National Security Intelligence Service, SEBIN, while his extradition to the United States was being discussed. This is February 4th. This is an old article, okay? So they're saying that this guy is in the possession of the National Intelligence Service, the SEBIN is what it's called. It's like their, I don't know, CIA, NSA, FBI, whatever. while his extradition to the United States is being discussed. And so then they go in to explain who Gorin is, who we're less interested in right now, but maybe one day we'll be more interested in him. So then they go on to explain how Gorin is very much, he's been cited by OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, for money laundering and bribes and all sorts of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Says he was charged in August 2017 in the Southern District of Florida with 1 count of conspiracy to violate the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering, and 9 counts of money laundering. The statement of accusations indicates that Gorin paid millions of dollars in bribes for 2 senior Venezuelan officials to obtain the rights to carry out currency exchange transactions with favorable rates for the Venezuelan government. Okay, so then we have his lawyer. This is Saab's lawyer, Luigi Giuliano, comes out and denies the claim. He says this is completely false. The guy who wrote this Venezuelan reporter who wrote this, it's fake news. Says his quote is, "It is simply not true that he has been arrested," Giuliano told Reuters, adding that there were no charges filed. And today he wanted to meet with the president for clarification. Reuters reported that, quote, journalists aligned with Venezuela's government also denied in social media posts that Saab had been taken into custody. Parliament President Jorge Rodriguez said he had no information on the matter, and to this day, no charges have been formally filed or announced. That's my own writing, but that's what they were being reported. And so here's the Reuters article that says that. This is from February 4th. Maduro ally Saab arrested in Venezuela. U.S. official says. Lawyers deny it. Of course, the U.S. official who said it was speaking on condition of anonymity because he had no right. He was scared to talk about this with his name. A lawyer who represented Saab in U.S. court in December 2023 declined to comment, but Luigi Giuliano said what I just read you, that he has not been arrested. Gorin was also part of this situation. And then let's see. Saab denied the charges that he had been siphoning around $350 million out of Venezuela through the U.S. as part of an alleged bribery scheme linked to Venezuela's state-controlled exchange rate. He denied the charges, appealed to have them dismissed on grounds of diplomatic immunity. An appeals court had not ruled on Saab's appeal at the time of the prisoner swap. This is referring to the thing that happened in 2023. This is October 2023, where he was sent back to Venezuela. He returned with fanfare to Venezuela at the end of 2023, where Maduro praised his loyalty to the country's socialist revolution and feted him as a national hero. Maduro later made Saab industry minister, a position he held until last month when he was removed by Rodriguez. So when he was arrested, like I think it was in 2022, we had an article citing his other lawyer who represented him in that criminal case and said, hey, here it is right here. Venezuela Maduro ally Saab, this is from February 2022, cooperated with DEA before arrest, court document shows. Alex Saab, a close ally of Venezuela President Nicolas Maduro, cooperated with U.S. authorities for nearly a year starting in 2018 by forfeiting funds and serving as a confidential source, according to a U.S. court filing unsealed on Wednesday. Saab agreed to be an active law enforcement source for the Drug Enforcement Administration and later confessed to paying bribes to Venezuelan officials, U.S. prosecutors said in the filing. In 2019, they told him he would face criminal charges if he did not voluntarily surrender, according to the filing. A lawyer for Saab, David Rivkin, said in a statement that Saab only met with the U.S. law enforcement officials to explain that his companies had done nothing wrong, adding that Venezuela was fully aware of his engagement with those officials. The news could be an embarrassment to Maduro's government, which has championed Saab as a special envoy who helped Venezuela's government conduct business deals under the radar of U.S. sanctions meant to force the ruling Socialist Party from power. It says, quote, the DEA and government counsel specifically advised Saab in April and May 2019 that his failure to surrender to U.S. authorities would result in him being charged in the Southern District of Florida, reads the filing. Rivkin, Saab's attorney, said in the statement that the release of the filing, quote, is no more than an attempt to harm the interests of the Bolivarian Republic of Congo. So Venezuela's information ministry did not immediately reply to a request for comment, but prosecutors had asked the filing remain sealed, arguing that Saab's family could face harm if the information were made available to Maduro's government. Judge Robert Scola on Wednesday ordered that the filing be unsealed. So the prosecutors, I want you to think about this for a second. Think really hard. The prosecutors, the U.S. prosecutors who are putting this guy in prison, this is back in 2019, but then they're revisiting this in 2022. They're saying, hey, judge, we want to keep this filing sealed. Like the fact that this guy was working with the DEA and working with the U.S. government. We want to keep this sealed because if Maduro finds out about it, he might kill this guy's family. It's going to be really bad for this guy's family if this goes public because Maduro is going to go after him. And the judge says, yeah, bullshit. Unseal it. Unsealed it. Then Biden pardons this guy, sends him back in a prisoner swap. Maduro welcomes him back with open arms, appoints him as industry minister, and then like throws a parade for him and greets him as like a conquering hero. What? So obviously those prosecutors were full of shit when they said that. This, like the Saab family was not fearful of retribution from the Maduro government. So who were they fearful of retribution from then? Perhaps they were fearful of retribution from a third party who would have been concerned that maybe Saab's testimony to the U.S. government would implicate them in what was going on, right? Like maybe he had been sent there by Maduro to give that information. And actually, that's not really a stretch. Like I'm not speculating that. Here's Rivkin. He says, Rivkin's Saab's attorney said in the statement that the release of the filing, quote, is no more than an attempt to harm the interests of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Quote, Alex Saab remains a loyal citizen and diplomat of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and will never do anything to harm the interests of the country and people that have given him so much, Rivkin wrote. Maduro's allies have characterized Washington's pursuit of Saab as part of an economic war in Venezuela, waged by the U.S. government. They say Saab had been granted Venezuelan citizenship and had been named a diplomat to negotiate aid and fuel shipments from Iran. Where's the Rivkin statement? Was it earlier in the article? A lawyer for Saab, David Rivkin, said in a statement that Saab only met with U.S. law officials to explain that his company had done nothing wrong, adding that Venezuela was fully aware of his engagement with those officials. So the lawyer is saying, oh, yeah, by the way, Maduro knew the whole time this guy was doing this. So obviously that was a lie by prosecutors. Why didn't the prosecutors want this filing released then? The prosecutors didn't want this to become public, that this guy was actually working with the U.S. government against who? Well, it couldn't have been against Maduro because Maduro is the one who sent him there. And then when he came back, Maduro gives him a big hug and says, welcome home. Like, here's a top position in my government. So who was he actually informing on? It wasn't Maduro, obviously. Okay. So now we fast forward to this situation. These shills are saying that this guy was arrested on February 4th. They're claiming that he was fired by Delcy Rodriguez. However, let's go pull up that. Let me pull up that article. I have that linked. Right here. Did I link all those together? So Delcy Rodriguez, when she quote unquote fires this guy, here's the New York Times. Venezuela said to detain Maduro allies targeted by the U.S. This is back on February 4th. Venezuelan security agents have questioned two prominent businessmen who have faced money laundering charges in the U.S., according to 5 Venezuelans and a U.S. official. They don't name these people, of course. The move against the men with ties to the deposed Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro signaled a deepening cooperation between the two countries. The politically connected businessmen Raul Gorin and Alex Saab were detained in the capital, Caracas, overnight between Tuesday and Wednesday, two of the people have said. U.S. law enforcement agencies had knowledge of the detention, said one of the Venezuelans and the American official. All of the people spoke on the condition of anonymity because they were not authorized to speak publicly. The current status of the two men is unclear. A representative for Mr. Gorin said he was free as of Wednesday evening. A lawyer for Mr. Saab, Luigi Giuliano, denied his client was detained. The detentions come just a month after U.S. forces attacked Venezuela and captured its leader. Let's see. It says the two businessmen were the first prominent allies of Mr. Maduro's government to come into the legal crosshairs of Mrs. Rodriguez's caretaker administration. Let me see. So let's go to the Caracol. Maybe that's the one that had it, which was this one. Translate to English. Yeah, so when Delcy Rodriguez posted about this publicly, she says he's going to be stepping aside. We thank him for his loyal service. He's going to be filling another important role. That's what she says. It's very vague. But she makes it clear that he's not being fired. He's going to go he has a new role that he needs to fill. Now, that, of course, could just be, political speak for he's fired and we're just being nice about it. But it certainly doesn't seem like they're disgracing him. It certainly doesn't seem like they're throwing him out with the trash. It certainly doesn't seem like they're, even if he was fired and he is being demoted, they're not dancing on his grave. They're not disgracing him. They're letting him save face. They're letting him keep his integrity, right? So what role is he going and filling now? They don't specify what that role is. But then suddenly 2 weeks later, he's at the 7 office meeting with them, speaking to them. And then the New York Times is reporting. Let's pull up the Times article. It says, Mr. Gorin is not known to face any charge in Venezuela. He has been under indictment in the United States since 2017 on accusations of laundering money. He has repeatedly denied those accusations. Mr. Saab has been charged with laundering money from Mr. Maduro and spent about 2 years in a U.S. prison until he was returned to Venezuela in a prisoner swap in 2023. And what these different outlets are claiming is they're claiming that what the U.S. Officials are really interested in are not Venezuela's doings. They're actually interested in what in his knowledge of the money laundering and how did the money get laundered out of Venezuela? What happens when the money leaves Venezuela, right? Because these guys might have knowledge of that because they've been all around this stuff, right? Apparently they were at the very heart of it. And we have right here, Delcy Rodriguez affirmed that Alex Saab's deportation was based on Venezuelan interests. The president in charge of Venezuela explained that the deportation of the Colombian businessman to the United States was carried out prioritizing the interests of the country. The government of Venezuela this Monday defended the deportation to the U.S. of Alex Saab, allegedly frontman for Nicolas Maduro, arguing that it is a decision based on the interests of the country and pointed out that the businessman is Colombian nationality and not Venezuelan. Quote, any decision made by the national government will be made out of an interest, which is the interest of Venezuela. There is no other consideration. Alex Saab is a citizen of Colombian origin. He served in Venezuela and is a matter between the United States of America and Alex Saab, said the president in charge, Delcy Rodriguez, in a broadcast on the state channel VTV. She added that the deportation of the businessman carried out last Saturday was an administrative measure justified in national interest. So it doesn't sound criminal. I mean, it was administrative. Doesn't say anything about criminal. Rodriguez was one of those who celebrated Saab's return in Venezuela in 2023 after he was released as a result of the negotiation between the Maduro government and then President of the United States, Joe Biden. The businessman first detained on June 12, 2020. I'm sorry, he was arrested, I guess, in 2020 in Cape Verde and later deported to the United States in October 2021, was appointed Venezuelan diplomat while in prison. And in 2024, once released, was appointed president of the International Center for Productive Investment. He defended, Ripe defended him. Yeah, okay. So then the lawyer defended him as that. So what Delcy Rodriguez, in my opinion, is saying here is she's saying that we didn't do this because the U.S. government wants him there. We're doing this because the Venezuelan government wants him there. So is he testifying against Maduro or is he testifying on Maduro's behalf? Is he going to come in and is he going to be like testimony used by the defense or used by the prosecution? Because it's unclear right now who he's actually testifying against. And I would posit that maybe it's not what it appears. Here's another example of this, by the way. Venezuela Attorney General resigns, then lands acting ombudsman role in surprise move. So this is February 25th. So a few weeks after Saab is allegedly arrested, but not really arrested at all. It says Venezuela's Attorney General, who for years played a central role in the government's repressive apparatus, resigned Wednesday as pressure grew for an overhaul of his office in the country's justice system, but lawmakers surprisingly appointed him immediately as the acting ombudsman. Tariq William Saab, this guy, by the way, has no relation to, as far as I know, I've dug into it, can't find a relationship. He's not related to Alex Saab. They just happen to have the same last name. A close ally of former President Nicolas Maduro submitted his resignation to the ruling party-controlled National Assembly without offering a reason for his decision. He had held the role of Venezuela's chief prosecutor since 2017, despite repeated accusations of human rights violations against him and his office. His resignation is the latest government change since the stunning January 3rd capture of Maduro by the U.S. military in the capital, Caracas. Saab will serve as acting ombudsman until a committee appoints a permanent replacement for Alfredo Ruiz, who had held the role since 2017. Ruiz resigned, citing personal, family, and health reasons that I must attend to. The ombudsman's responsibilities include the promotion, defense, and monitoring of human rights. Both resignations follow mounting scrutiny of their offices following last month's decisions of acting President Delcy Rodriguez to release from prison people long detained for their political beliefs and propose an amnesty bill, which she signed into law last week. Rodriguez's moves have led to small demonstrations and debates that have underscored patterns of trumped-up charges, prosecutorial delays, and other abuses against real and perceived government opponents. Quote, his departure as Attorney General is promising, but appointing him as ombudsman is a slap in the face to victims. Juanita Gobertis, America's director at Human Rights Watch, said in a statement referring to Saab. Human Rights Watch, by the way, is about as deep state as it goes. Like, they're the group that goes around and basically writes up white papers to justify State Department intervention in troublesome countries that are not complying with the global cartel. Quote, meaningful reform requires appointing a new attorney general who is independent, ceases to persecute dissent, and commits to ensuring that all political prisoners are released and amnestied. Saab has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing accusations. He defended his actions Wednesday, saying he fulfilled his role, quote, with integrity and honor, and played the constitutional role of preserving peace and protecting the human rights of our people in a period of unimaginable aggression. And then it goes on to just talk about human rights panels and how sad they are that Maduro's government is still intact. In a report that addressed the 2024 presidential election, the panel called Saab's actions to give a semblance of legality to the serious abuses committed after the vote, accusing Maduro of stealing the election. Quote, the role played by the Attorney General was most conspicuously evident during the crackdown after the announcement of the election results, according to the panel's report. Quote, following the protest, the Attorney General led the state action that resulted in human rights violations, including mass arrests under the guise of the executive's narrative of fighting a coup d'etat and fascism. So let's back up and understand what is it that Tariq William Saab was doing for Maduro. Because it says this guy was the acting attorney general starting in 2017, okay? And that he was the guy going around and rounding up and throwing in prison all these people in Venezuela who apparently were like angels from heaven, according to these human rights people. These were the good guys that were being locked up by Tariq William Saab. So I found this. This is going to be, I'm not going to be able to read this to you, but this is the PDVSA, which is the state oil company for Venezuela. Their consolidated financial statement from December 31st, 2015. Okay, this thing is like, how many pages is this? It's 128 pages, and a lot of it is, charts and, number crunching. But on page 78, it cites note 32. That's not page 78. That's page 78. Caso de investigación. And it's all in Spanish. So I translated it. And the translation is a little hard to read, but we'll do our best. So here is the translation. I just used like a JPEG translator. And so it didn't really, it changed the font color a bunch, but actually makes it a little easier to read. In December 2015, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Texas, Houston Division in the United States of America has filed an indictment against representatives of certain PDVSA contractors and suppliers for certain violations of anti-corruption and anti-money laundering, among other charges, in connection with contracts to procure national sale of related goods and services concluded with a PDVSA subsidiary during the period comprised between the years of 2009 and 2014. Important to remember that Maduro was elected president in 2013, April 2013, after Hugo Chavez dies of cancer. And Hugo Chavez holds like the last time he appears on television, he has Maduro sitting next to him, and Maduro's like crying, and he's basically like, yeah, I'm about to die. There's an election coming up. I can't appoint this guy as like leader of Venezuela because we have a constitution, but I encourage everyone to vote for him in the election. He's my guy. I'm endorsing him. So he wins. Maduro comes into power in 2013, 2014. And this investigation that they're looking at occurs that this is the U.S. government looking at. This is not the Venezuelan government. The U.S. government indicts these guys, but saying that their corruption occurred between 2009 and 2014. So that would have been during Hugo Chavez's, the end of Hugo Chavez's life, when he was battling cancer and going back and forth to Cuba and getting treatments and all that. It says, additionally, certain former employees of a foreign subsidiary of PDVSA were accused by the same facts. All the defendants pleaded guilty in different procedural opportunities in 2015 and 2016. PDVSA's audit committee discussed this matter and instructed its investigation and control committee to initiate a thorough investigation into these facts. This research and control committee is a body to support to the audit committee, whose purpose is to intervene in all situations in which evidence arises in violation or weakening of internal control over business processes, which could lead to errors, omissions, or fraud, pronouncing and promoting actions aimed at detecting, investigating, and preventing and mitigating irregular practices and behaviors, and any circumstances that lead to the inefficiencies and other effects adverse to PDVSA's assets. This research and control committee is made up of the following PDVSA officials: the executive director of internal audit, the executive director of budget and control, the legal consultant, and the corporate loss prevention and control manager. The investigation and control committee initiated a review of these facts and through control instances of the company, and additionally hired external specialists in fraud, accounting, and law with recognition in internationally to conduct an independent investigation for the period between 2009 and 2015, considering, among other matters, the following: identify the internal controls that were breached in the manner in which they occurred, identify the modalities and patterns of conduct associated with the aforementioned violation of internal controls, including those described in the December 2015 indictment, assess whether such violations of internal controls were widespread or limited to certain transactions or individuals, identify possible irregular acts that may have been committed by officials or suppliers of the company, and identify the possible perpetrators of such irregular acts. So they're saying identify the companies that were involved, identify the individuals who were involved. Determine the effect of such irregular acts on PDVSA's consolidated financial statement. How did this impact us financially? The fraud that these guys were doing. Not just the fraud that the U.S. found, but let's see what other fraud we can find. Determine the mechanisms for compensation for possible property damage. PDVSA does not tolerate acts of corruption and will continue to investigate and act with the purpose of determining responsibilities for the identified facts. To prevent situations like these from occurring again, the company has established, among others, the following actions: strengthen the design and implementation of certain internal controls related to compliance with the current Venezuelan and international legislation applicable to the company's activities, establish new procedures and controls in the internal process of payment to suppliers, preemptively block certain entities that are in the auxiliary registry of PDVSA contractors and that present certain indications of being related to the entities and individuals under investigation, create an instance for the verification and conduct of the research and analysis processes of all suppliers of related goods and services, update and improve the code of ethics, including the development and implementation of a section referring to the commercial conduct. The investigation is ongoing and has so far made it possible to identify issues of interest, such as to confirm that the company has been a victim of fraud in its international procurement process for goods and related services. So they're saying here, we are the victims here. It's our money that's being stolen. The money that's being embezzled and laundered offshore, it belongs to PDVSA. So, trying to cast us as like the criminals here, we're actually the victim. It's our bank account that's being robbed, which makes perfect sense to me. The next page, it says, identify the modalities through which fraud was committed and the violations of the controls interns who allowed the situation to happen. Identify certain persons of interest who may have some responsibility for the events or may contribute to the achievement of the research objectives. Identify indications that have made it possible to isolate the transactions affected by fraud from the rest of the transactions related to the international procurement of related goods and services. This has offered elements to consider that to date and in this state of the investigation, these irregular acts are not generalized in all transactions of the international procurement process for related goods and services, which is carried out through one of the company's subsidiaries. Due to the impracticability to determine the periods and additional amounts for possible surcharges incurred by the company as a result of fraud, PDVSA developed a methodology to estimate the possible impact on its consolidated financial statements as of December 31st, 2015, and for the year then ended. Based on said methodology and in consideration of the progress of the research and the issues identified to date, there is no material effect on such consolidated financial statements. This methodology included the following. So looking at PDVSA contractors and suppliers allegedly involved in the irregularities under investigation, taking into consideration the information in the December 2015 U.S. indictment and the progress of this investigation, looking at the years between 2009 and 2014, but also the 2015, which was the year corresponding to the most recent consolidated financial statement. Look at the contracts signed with the aforementioned entities that were identified and during the indicated period previously. Look at the payments related to the aforementioned entities and identify them. An average overprice percentage was determined based on the information in the December indictment of 2015 and identified it to date through the investigation on the total value of affected contracts. This percentage was used to estimate the possible impacts on the total amounts of the contracts. So then finally, it wraps up by saying the investigation will continue in order to identify all those responsible for these events, to specify the possible patrimonial effects and to exercise future legal actions. As the investigation progresses and establish responsibilities, the company will take the necessary legal actions under Venezuelan legislation and other applicable laws, including the filing of complaints and accusations to punish those responsible, and other legal actions, including civil claims and seizure of assets to seek compensation for the damage suffered. PDVSA and its external specialists have estimated that the investigation will take some time and could require changes in its scope as it progresses. Therefore, such research is subject to a number of uncertainties whose possible ultimate effect on the results of operations and the consolidated financial position of PDVSA cannot be determined with sufficient precision at this time. So basically what they're saying there is this is going to take a while. We're going to do a huge investigation. We're going to look back at all these years. We're going to look at every contract. We're going to look at every person. We're going to look at every subsidiary, and we're going to identify who are the bad actors. And guess what? When we identify those people, we're going to file complaints against them in civil court. We're going to file requests that they be prosecuted to the appropriate authorities, the Venezuelan authorities. And we're also going to ask that their assets be seized and given to us as compensation. Okay? So this is, again, at the end of 2015, this is being filed. So now let's look, and we're going to wrap up because it's 4 o'clock. Let's look at well, there used to be a good little there used to be this great little write-up on the corruption purges. But basically, Maduro starts these corruption purges in like 2017. He gets the laptop from hell, which shows him even more corruption. He gets his laptop that shows him all this corruption that happens, gives it to David Boyce. David Boyce goes and files the civil complaints in U.S. court in 2018. And then Maduro starts arresting people. He starts seizing their assets. He starts throwing them in prison. He starts saying, hey, these guys are corrupt. These guys betrayed our country. They stole our money. They were working with foreign businessmen, foreign criminals who were plundering our coffers and making our country poor. So I'm throwing these guys in prison and I'm taking their assets because those assets belong to us. And the foreign press, that's the American press, responds by saying the Obama administration and then later the Trump, State Department, which I would not say is the Trump State Department, but the CIA, the deep state, they look at these actions and they say, dictator. He's a dictator. He's violating human rights. He's throwing people in prison. He's taking their property. Do you understand now, like the framing? I just read you word for word a government document published by the Venezuelan government in 2015 promising, they said in that document, this is only the beginning. We are announcing right now that we are starting this investigation. We have no idea where it's going to lead, but we're going to follow the facts wherever they take us. And guess what? People are probably going to go to prison if they've broken the law. People are probably going to get their assets seized if they stole our money. That's exactly what ends up happening time and time and time again. And I can show you that. Let me pull up the damn mind map. Stand by for processing. And then the lying mainstream media, which has lied to us about every aspect of our existence, every little thing, every part of our life, they have lied to us about everything. They also lied to us about this because their friends were the ones being thrown in prison. Their friends were the criminals who were plundering the Venezuelan coffers and stealing their money, collaborating, by the way, with Venezuelan government officials. So when people say the Venezuelan government's corrupt, yeah, it is. Maduro's own government published a document saying that their government was corrupt and saying that they were going to launch an enormous investigation, which would take many, many years and would probably change direction and change scope and, evolve as they learn more information. So here is screenshots, or here are screenshots of that effect, of that outcome. And that is right. Where did I park that? Where did I park you? Up here, right here. Boom. That's Africa. Venezuela is... Oh, Venezuela's up here. I moved this around. Sorry. Excuse me for that. It's freezing up. Hold on. Right here. So here's just like a few. Like here is Venezuela's ex-oil minister charged with stealing millions from the state oil company. This is as recent as April 2024. Okay. Venezuela's Maduro to replace oil minister. This is a year before that. Another oil minister gets arrested in a sweeping corruption probe. Let's see. You have 6 U.S. oil executives convicted of corruption in Venezuela. That was in 2020. Now these guys are they're called U.S. oil executives. They're Venezuelan nationals who work for Citgo in Houston, right? So they work for a U.S. oil company, but they're Venezuelan, and so they were arrested by Venezuela. And it says right here, 6 oil executives have been jailed after being found guilty of corruption by a court in Venezuela. And by the way, the State Department pursued these guys and were like, please give us these guys back. They're innocent. Let them go. And they did eventually get them back, by the way. But they were convicted in court of stealing money from the Venezuelan government. Let's see. Let's find some more. I have so many of these articles out there of how these. Let me see if I can find one more, because I want to find one from Maduro corruption sweep 2018. Yeah, because remember that guy Nicholas Kroll or Matthias Kroll, the German national who was arrested in Miami because he was laundering all that money, right? And then okay, so here's Google or whatever. It says in 2018, the Maduro regime initiated a significant crackdown on alleged corruption within PDVSA and related state entities, framing it as a, quote, professional, scientific, and disciplined probe to root out graft. This sweep resulted in the detention of numerous executives and former presidents of the state oil company alongside high-level officials such as Ramirez, the head of the body issuing Venezuela's official digital coin, the Petro. Let's see. Key aspects of the 2018 corruption efforts include PDVSA purges, investigation of digital currency, clap scandal exposure. That's the thing that Saab, Alex Saab, was involved in. International sanctions. Okay, so they're there rounding people up year after year after year, arresting people for the same thing that the U.S. government is accusing them of doing, and the Venezuelan government is actually going and doing it. And then because they're arresting the people that are friends with the people in the deep state is accusing the Venezuelan government of being evil. It's the same reason why they say that Putin is evil. It's the same reason why they say Trump is evil. It's the same reason why they said MBS is evil. Remember when MBS rounded up all of his corrupt cousins in 2017 and threw them in the Ritz-Carlton prison? Like he turned the Ritz-Carlton into a prison, rounded them all up, threw them in there. Guess what? Those people were like the number one donors to the Democrat Party. They were the people who funded ISIS. They were the people who funded 9/11. MBS threw them in prison. And the State Department in the deep state and the MSM said he was a dictator. I mean, I would encourage somebody to step forward and offer a more reasonable explanation of this situation than what I'm presenting here. But nobody has done that. Present me a theory that hits every single box, that explains every single little thing, every little development, every little contradiction, right? but still lines up with the official narrative that Maduro is the bad guy and Maduro is, this really corrupt dictator who's rounding people up and, good people up and throwing them in prison. Show me those people. Okay. Because if Maduro was a bad guy, why would the deep state be sending, ex-special forces operatives, mercenaries in there to try to overthrow his government secretly? And then those guys get caught and arrested, and then the deep state has to beg for him back in a prisoner swap. Doesn't make any sense. All right, we are way past time, so we gotta go now. Let's check in on the chat. Is the chat even still with me? Yeah, maybe they are. Maybe they're not. Chat is still here. All right, we got Big Mama T, $50. Thank you, Big Mama T. Next month, I'll start using Boost so you get more. Today, Boost is moving too fast to type in CC info. Big Mama T, thank you so much for your generosity. Appreciate you, fam. Just scrolling through the whole chat. Playing catch up. Babbage 3, you got a YouTube super chat. Did I? Thank you, Babbage. I should be able to get that. Yep, right here. Thank you, Babbage. I appreciate that. Depot 41, $10. I saw a story today about cars for kids being used to benefit one ethnic exclusively, the Jews, and that they've been banned from playing their commercials in California. Just wondering if you heard that story. I did hear that story. I haven't looked into it. I will look into it, and we'll talk about it on Friday, because I remember that commercial from like back when I used to listen to sports talk radio. 1-800 Cars for Kids, KRS Cars for Kids, 1-800 Cars for Kids. Donate your car today. That was the jingle. So yeah, I'm familiar with that story. I haven't looked into the details of it, but I will. I just saw it like come up on, just scrolling social media when I was out of town. And I thought it was just funny because I remembered that. And then finally, we have just checking boosts, make sure we're good on boosts. Yeah, I think we're good on boosts. All right, guys, hit the thumbs up, and we will see y'all on Share the Show. We will see y'all on Friday. Between now and then, Thursday is the choice with Ash, so I'll see you on Thursday, but then we'll be back on Friday. This is Badlands Media. Y'all have a fantastic
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.